Good afternoon, Matthew Battle here. Welcome to Oxford Social. This is our webinar coming to you today. We've got 4 excellent speakers all signed in and online, and we've got 60 minutes to get through this. So there's a lot to get through. Oxford's very much at the centre of the discussion, but before we do that, just want to do some housekeeping. It's quite important. First of all, my name's Matthew Battle. I'm the moderator. Any issues, please come back to me. In terms of questions, on your right-hand side, you'll see something that says chat. Please can you click on that, and you'll see the ability to ask questions. And also we're going to have a poll as well. So we will issue a poll. So the first one is coming up now. So you might want to have a look at that and give us your thoughts on that. It'll be really, really helpful. On the questions, again, the questions are really important. It looks like we're already getting quite equal at the moment on the poll. That's interesting. So on the questions as well, please come back to us. We want to try and have a chat there. I appreciate there's 4 speakers, so we're going to have a bit of time to sort of manage that, but there will be time at the end to do that. So finally, on the questions, like all UK prop social events, which we complete around the Thames Valley, we always have a bottle of champagne, and a bottle of champagne will be the best question. And also, I'm really pleased to say for this event, we did manage to raise some money, and there's a cheque for £250 going towards NHS Trust. So thank you very much for everybody who paid on this event, and we will send that off over the next day or two. So the 4 speakers are Rachel Dickey, Interim CEO at Oxford University Development, Harriet Waters, Head of Sustainability at University of Oxford, Richard Venables, Board Member of Experience Oxfordshire and Director of VSL and Partners. And finally, Laura Peacock, Innovation Hub Manager, Communities, Oxford County Council. We'll come to them in a minute, and we'll start with Harriet in a minute. However, just a bit of context, and it is important, I think, because I think we're in Oxford's in a cusp, and it's in a cusp of a period of change, which is really interesting, and maybe a little daunting. Oxford has enjoyed a high degree of demand from bioscience and other sectors. It's also, ironically, had a low level of supply. Startup money has been intense. It's got an outrageous connection into education, and startups have been constant, with 2 or 3 unicorns talked about. And finally, it's had a healthy housing market. However, since the pandemic, a lot has changed, and really that's what today is about. Fundamentally, legacy cities or heritage cities such as Oxford and Cambridge to a certain extent are under tremendous pressure now to change and to be maybe forced to change. And I think this is the interesting part of this discussion. This is not London. This is about looking at a city like Oxford and the pressures which it faces, which are quite unique and potentially quite dangerous time for it if it doesn't grasp these changes. And really that's what today's talk's about. It's about talking to 4 key stakeholders within Oxford and also Oxfordshire who are involved in the property and the built environment, and what they are doing and how they're going to look at their projects and their remit differently following the pandemic. And again, maybe slightly altruistic, can we build a better Oxford? So let's go to our first speaker. Harriet, are you there? Excellent. The system works. Fantastic. I thought I'd go to an academic because I knew you didn't know how to use IT. No. Talking about stakeholders, University of Oxford is obviously the key or stakeholder within Oxford. How do you see could you just give a quick introduction onto what your role is? And then secondly, what do you see in your role as head of sustainability as changing in a post-pandemic world which we're entering?
Great, thank you. And thanks for the invitation to be here. It's great. I head up the sustainability team at the university. So I'm lucky enough to have 12 people working on sustainability, and those are in the general areas that you'd expect. So we have about half the team working on energy and carbon emissions, a quarter of the team working on transport, and the rest of us working in engagement, biodiversity, food, that kind of space. So it means that we write strategy and policy and guidance for the way in which the university behaves, and in order to improve its own sustainability profile. And that's very much just the university and not the colleges, they being separate legal entities. But we do work very closely with colleges to try to make sure whatever we're doing that's of benefit can be shared with them, so good practice can be spread around the whole Oxford community. So that's about what I do. I've been doing that for the last 7 years. In terms of what I think about Oxford post-COVID, it's all about learning the lessons that we've all very keenly felt, isn't it? There's been some amazing things happening during lockdown. We've seen vast improvement in air quality for the city, a huge reduction in vehicle traffic, an increase on the uptake of cycling, a massive keenness for people to lead more sustainable lives. So Google are reporting a 4,000% increase on sustainable living type searches. And I'd like to frame that in kind of 4 A's. So of those learnings that we've all experienced and all gone through, what can we aspire to? So can we aspire to this much better level of air quality within Oxford? What can we adapt? So paper use, I think, is really fascinating, although not probably the first thing that you would think of. But I've heard of universities quoting £100,000 a month saving on paper use. And how can we transfer that kind of learning in a future world? What do we want to just straightforwardly adopt? So this willingness to use these different virtual platforms. So using Zoom and Teams and Demio, these are things that have been talked about for so long and haven't really been adopted. How can we actually make sure that they're a permanent feature in our future life? And then what do we want to abandon? I mean, I'm sure there's other people that would agree with me that after the pandemic, we wouldn't ever want to mix homeschooling with working from home.
Right, here we go. Sorry about that. That's very helpful. Rachel, could you give us your views and again on how you see your role changing, which is a relatively new role and new organisation within Oxford's real estate market, and again a little about what you see as the changes going forward, Rachel.
Hi, so my name is Rachel Dickey and I hail originally from L&G, where I was part of the team who bid to be a partner of the University of Oxford to help them with 3 out of 4 of their strategic goals. So that is more affordable graduate accommodation, subsidised staff accommodation, and innovation districts where the university can be based alongside corporate startups and scale-ups to really drive economic growth and maximise the value of their research. So we set up this joint venture in June last year with the backing of up to £4 billion from L&G to fund and deliver these projects over probably a 10 to 15 year timeframe. And that's a number of sites across Oxford City and into Cherwell as well. So I moved across to get this business started and start looking at a few of the sites. So our first site is a small graduate accommodation scheme in Iffley called Court Place Gardens. We're also looking at a site in Wellington Square, which is existing student accommodation where the university wants to introduce more office space, and then also Begbroke Science Park. So picking off different parts of the agenda. From our perspective, obviously, yes, to be a kind of completely new business and then plunged into this scenario has been strange and challenging, but because we're at this early stage, the focus is really on building the teams to start delivering these schemes, and we're pre-planning. You know, we're at least a year away from starting on site, so we haven't had the challenges that others have had, and we're backed by two really long-term investors who believe that, as with other cycles, you know, we will ride this one, and we have a responsibility as institutional investors to position places to help them accelerate out of this crisis, and I believe that Oxford is a place that could really benefit. And to answer your question, Matthew, absolutely something that we should be looking across the board of how we can build it back better.
Just one supplementary question, Rachel. You Legal & General still 100% supportive. I suppose as a long-term investor, you can't see any change there. And which of the projects did you say was going to come forward first?
So from the L&G perspective, there is still support for this project and others across the UK. You know, I think we do feel as a business that we have a real responsibility to secure the long-term future of the country. Ultimately, we are there to create a better life for our customers, and they are 15 million people who live up and down the country, and an aging population through our pension fund business, and so life sciences particularly, and the kind of the research that's going on in the UK is all really beneficial to our overall business as well. So we're supporting it in different ways. And then what was first project to come forward will be Court Place Gardens, which is the graduate accommodation scheme, hopefully closely followed by Wellington Square and Begbroke Science Park.
Excellent. Okay, thank you very much. That's very helpful, and it's great also to hear about a new stakeholder in Oxford, in the sense of a new development arm, which will have profound changes within Oxford going forward. So, Richard, I don't know if you're there, Richard. It'd be great, Mr. Oxford, the O of Oxford in many respects, more fingers in more pies than Dan, the pie eater. Board member of Experience Oxfordshire, and obviously director at VSL and Partners. What's your view? Just a bit of explanation about your role as per the others, and also again how you see, or what you see as the key changes are going to happen in your world for the pandemic.
Yeah, thanks, Matthew. Thanks for the invitation. Good to see everyone in the webinar sphere as well. Some friends and colleagues joining in today. So as Matthew said, I'm a director at VSL, so we deal with commercial property in Oxfordshire, but fingers in a couple of other pies, and I really feel that the economic well-being of a place is intrinsically linked to the social well-being of a place. So that's why I get actively involved. I'm a trustee of Experience Oxfordshire. That's tourism and cultural, life of Oxfordshire, then Active Oxfordshire, which is sport, physical activity, and then Oxfordshire Youth. And these three other organisations have kept me equally busy over the last 9-10 weeks or so, and we've probably seen more fundamental change in both our economy and the lives we lead in the last 10 weeks than we will see in the next 10 months, 10 years. It's been transformational. I'd just like to challenge first on your initial question, which was, what changes should we make to this heritage city of ours? And I think Oxford is so much more than just the heritage and the spires, and which reflects our history. But Modern Oxford is one influenced by many things, including science and technology. But modern Oxford is also a divided place with fantastic riches, but is also one of the most deprived counties and cities in the UK. And if I had one wish, it would be to see this inequality tackled. I think we have a new norm that we're still all adjusting to and thinking about. It will impact on us all in different measures. It'll change our working perspective, working from home, how we change the office, the work environment, how we travel to work. I think it'll impact on different sectors in different ways. And we know that tourism and the leisure market is really hit hard. And Experience Oxfordshire did a really good study about 2 or 3 weeks ago with their partner organisations. 45% of Oxfordshire's leisure and tourism businesses may be forced to shut permanently within the next 3 months. And £137.5 million is lost in tourism revenue each month, which is pretty hard to comprehend. So, we've got some real challenges ahead, but I would like to see some of our inequalities tackled to really make a difference to this city.
And you pose some good challenges there, and again, it's getting a balance. And in this world which we're facing post COVID-19, is that we need to sort of grasp these issues of inequality, and perhaps they become more exposed. Which leads us on to our final speaker, Laura, the Innovation Hub Manager Communities for Oxford County Council. But perhaps you could, yeah, great, thanks a lot. Perhaps you could, yeah, excellent, thank you. Perhaps you could just explain your role, which and the team you've got, and what, from a county council point of view, you're involved with, and some of your aspirations.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Thanks, Matthew. So my name's Laura Peacock. I work for Oxfordshire County Council. I've been manager of the Innovation Hub in different forms for the past 6-7 years. We have grown from just 2 members of staff to 24 members of staff. I think it's really important to acknowledge that actually 80% of our staff are funded externally and not by Oxfordshire County Council. The role of the iHub at the County Council is to really create a neutral space for the innovators, so the businesses, the universities, and the County Council, who act on behalf of the citizens of Oxfordshire and Oxford. So what we want to do is make sure that we're bringing in, as Richard said, Oxford and Oxfordshire is about so much more than the heritage. So bringing all the exciting projects that's happening, all the ideas, and actually using Oxford as a space to test these ideas, to test quickly, potentially fail, but fail quickly and learn fast. And that's something that the Innovation Hub is really keen to do. In terms of the areas that we work in, it's future mobility. So we've got the biggest connected autonomous vehicle team in the UK. We work on drones. We've got energy and EV integration team, and we've also got a health and care innovation team and a data modeling team. So for me, it's about bringing all those areas together and making the most of it, and using the iHub as a neutral space to create and generate and encourage those ideas. In terms of our role in COVID, it's actually been it's been brilliant in some ways, because for the first time people want to hear us, they want to look at our data, they want to explore the evidence that we've been working on for a good number of years, and I think that's really important. In terms of how our work will change, I think it's very much we'll continue to do the same things, but we have got more of an open door to do that. So we will continue to collect data, because I think what's really important is, if we're looking to change, to reprioritize how we use the space in Oxford and Oxfordshire, you need to really understand how the users are using the space. So data and modeling is really important, because what you need to understand what a successful place is to understand how people are using the city. And that's where our role comes in. And I think something which I think is really important is redefining what success is. And I think what Richard said is the well-being indicator is so important. And I think that's something that will come out of the COVID time, is the importance of well-being. Places like Iceland and New Zealand have changed the way they measure GDP because I'm putting well-being indicators in there. And I think Oxford should be at the forefront of doing this. Sorry, I can't hear you.
Plus complimentary questions for you, Laura. You talk about the need for data and also looking at modern technologies. Is Oxfordshire embracing that? And in terms of new ways of working, can you see the county starting to embrace that? I mean, just looking at the poll here, for example, it's not incredibly representative, but it's a start. Should we encourage light electric trams? 75% seem to think we should from this poll. And also, should Oxford close more roads to traffic, which has huge property implications, and 75% are saying yes. So there seems to be some momentum there for change. Can you see that at a top level momentum?
Yeah, I think absolutely. I think this is Oxford, not Oxfordshire County Council and Oxford City Council, working with universities, working with businesses. We're already in many ways trying to really push how the city is planned. The zero emission zone was the first of its kind in the world, bringing in some quite brave decisions like demand management for the city to look at how air quality is managed. So I think we had those ambitions for Oxford. I think this will encourage that even more. I think what's really important is to make sure that any decisions that are made are based on the right data and actually what the COVID world will be like after this. So I think this will push us to be even more ambitious. I know that the discussions that I've had internally with senior management and also businesses and universities in Oxford is looking at how we reprioritise road space. How can we be really brave and understand how we should do that in a different way in terms of the money we spend on roads, but also the money we spend on infrastructure for public transport, but also cycling and pedestrians. So I think yes, with the climate change emergency and the support of that at a senior level of the county council, we're now pushing at a more open door. And my role is to make sure that any decisions that are made are based on the before and the after data and the predictive analytics, and because we've got that capability within the team.
Essential. The word smart city is overused, but it seems to be some of those issues Oxford needs to grapple with, and its position within Oxfordshire as well. So just on that note of sustainability and the university, Harriet, are you able to comment on that? And what's your view in terms of looking at the sustainable approach of the university? Laura, do you want to do that?
So I suppose that's a really live question for us at the moment. I'm in the midst of writing a new sustainability strategy for the university, and that's going to mean big changes for the way in which the university operates. It's going to have ambitious targets of setting a time frame for getting to zero carbon and a net gain in biodiversity. And we're expecting that to be adopted kind of early next year. So it's very early stages at the moment, but we've come up with lots of different things that would enable those goals. And the types of things are around obviously sticking to our existing passive house methodology for our building projects, but also doing a lot more about the biodiversity work that we do on a project-by-project basis, but also site by site as well, and working hand in hand with local organisations on that. It will mean things that need behaviour change for our staff and students. So we've surveyed our staff and students about what they think about us reducing the meat that we consume. Crucially, lots of stuff about flying, because that's a huge impact for the university. It's, the carbon impact that we have through flights is as big as the carbon impact that we have through our buildings. And we're not about to, once we can fly again, it's unlikely that a university is going to be able to change so quickly that it'll immediately stop flying. So what do we do?
Sorry to interrupt you mid-flow, but that's an interesting question. It also picks up one of the questions about international students.
Yeah.
And obviously the carbon emission through flights are enormous, but yet university relies very heavily on international students.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's exactly the kind of difficult question that we're having to grapple with in writing this strategy. So the strategy is not going to be saying we're going to stop taking international students. It's going to be saying it's part of our business model to take international students. But what do we do to make up for that, that impact that we have through taking in international students? And are there any ways in which we can reduce some of those impacts? So an associated set of carbon emissions is all the visitors that international students have. And other universities have done things like holding their graduation ceremonies abroad, as well as in their, next to their own university. Maybe that's something that Oxford needs to explore as well. But as I say, at the moment, we're just setting strategy rather than jumping into the solutions. Oh, you're
just talking about the strategy. What's the end result? How will that get presented? Is it to go into a bigger document throughout the university, or how will it engage, I guess, with the property sector is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be made publicly available. It will be, it'll need to be signed off by our top level, so the council, the university council, and the original timescale on that strategy was to write it in time to be able to talk about it clearly at the COP negotiations in Glasgow, which were planned for November, but as they're now postponed, and there's no new date for them, it's a bit unclear how, how and when we will publish, but they'll definitely be publicly available, and we'll definitely do a launch.
Thanks very much. Rachel, we've talked a bit about, and there's been some questions coming in about the need for a smart city, and about ambition, which I think is a really good word, and about the need for Oxford to be ambitious. It seems to me that's also fundamental, Rachel, to some of the approach which you're following and your investment. We've talked offline about things like innovation quarters. How does that fit, and how do these ideas of a smarter way of developing city centre fit with your plans, at Oxford University Development?
So I think you're absolutely right, and Laura used the word brave. Like, I think this is a time to make some tough calls that will benefit the city and the region in the long term. And I know there is a concentration on Oxford, but even looking at how Oxford can't accommodate enough housing to support its growth, and it desperately needs the areas around the city to do their bit, shows that this is not a city only solution, and that collaboration across the boundaries is going to be really important in terms of housing, in terms of transport. And I think, one of the issues that that this has thrown up, and I'd be really interested to hear what others think, is, you've got a city like Oxford, where a lot of people want to live there, a lot of people work there, a lot of people who work there live quite far away and rely on public transport. How are they going to feel about coming back to work? And does that actually take some of the heat out of the city centre market and get companies looking at the areas on the periphery? I don't know the answer, but I think there will be a combination of both. And I think what I really like about this idea of innovation districts is combining employment space with residential. So within a kilometre or two, you can have these employment hubs and a mix of housing that does start to address some of the issues that Richard was talking about in terms of inclusivity, in terms of aspiration of the kids growing up there, trying to provide opportunity that isn't there at the moment, and make it more accessible, so it's not a science park in the middle of a green field with nothing around it that no one would go to otherwise. Trying to find ways to better engage with the community and give people jobs on their doorstep, rather than a reaction to this being continued urban sprawl, which has negative implications on the environment.
Have you got a exemplar, because it's quite an interesting area, this, in terms of new settlements and how new settlements are designed, and within the ARC, the Cambridge Oxford Arch, there's a number of new settlements being talked about and planned. And I guess, sorry, I call it innovation quarters, is it innovation districts? I'll get the language right. What's an example of a successful district within the world which we should be aiming for? And what's it look like, I guess?
I don't think anybody really knows, because each one that exists currently is different. It has there are either different fundamentals or different growth strategies that sits behind it. But I think what's so important is Oxford's got the physical assets to do it. It's got the networks there which can be built on, and that's why I'm really supportive of us continuing to do what we do, because I think Oxford needs more space to not only retain the growing businesses but attract new ones. And I don't think that changes. And everyone cites like MIT and Boston, Cambridge, Massachusetts, and how that's come about. And everyone wants to locate there. There's an argument of, if you work for a startup and you lose your job, you go out and get a coffee and you meet someone else who says, oh, well, we're hiring, so come and work here. And there's this idea of kind of critical mass, and the money follows that. And I don't see any reason why Oxford should have the potential to be as successful as that. But it needs the investment, it needs the planning, it needs the long-term thinking, it needs the partnerships. And that's all hard, all possible, but hard.
Good point about planning. And I know there's a local plan for 2036 just been submitted, and collaboration, partnerships. And I think that's really interesting. I assume Begbroke could fulfill some of these aspirations, given its location just to the north of Oxford, as a innovation district. Is that your thoughts or not?
Yes, absolutely, because it offers an incredible opportunity, subject to the Cherwell local plan being approved, obviously, to combine a large area of employment use with new housing. And it obviously sits north of Oxford North, where there's an enormous potential to expand as well. So that whole area starts to become really interesting in what we could achieve in northern Oxford.
Just Richard, could I bring you in here now? There's been, and you very clearly said because this issue of inequality, and perhaps looking at different planning regimes, greater flexibility, and some of the aspirations within these innovation districts. Do you have some resonance with that? Can you see some of the answers to some of the questions you're looking for in terms of ensuring that Oxford has more balance in its approach to people who live there and work there?
So I think we need to just take it back a little bit to our economy as a whole. And there's no doubt that science and technology has been the boom sector in the last 2 to 3 years. Massive amount of startups, and we're seeing this now impact in the growth of businesses as we go forward. But underlying all this is an economy, a broad and diverse economy, and a significant proportion of the population who are not scientists or innovators. Having said that, I know we can all be innovative in the way we work, and that is the strong message from the LEP. But there are a lot of people who will not work in innovation quarters, who will depend upon the more menial tasks, and those are essential for the workings and operations of things like colleges, our hospitality, our retail areas, etc. So I just want to bring this back to the fact that I think we are resilient as a city and a county in many ways where other cities are not. But we have fundamental issues that are going to affect all of us equally, such as the absolute sort of destruction of the high street as we knew it, and a newfound or a new requirement to reinvent the city, which includes how we live in it, how we travel to it, how we operate within it, and I'd like to bring all this back to the fact that we are, or we have been viewed for many years as a silo-looking place with lots of individual sectors and bodies looking after their own, and everyone's been guilty of this, from the local authorities to the third sector to our educational bodies. And we need to have a much broader conversation now about how we change things. So I think we've got to look not just as Oxford as an innovation district and centre. It is undoubtedly an area that it needs to go to, but we have to be equally conversant and conscious of our dynamic and disperse and unequal society here, and how we bring that forward. And one of the things I also wrote, just to sort of mix it up a bit, is that I think we also have to look at this demographically, how we go forward. That I think we really have to put more focus on the youth of Oxfordshire, not just those who are at school at the moment, but those coming out of education into their first jobs. For many people, that hospitality sector would be where they would go, whether it's for part-time work or for full-time or retail space, and that's not going to be there. So how do we build a sustainable future for them?
You raise, and obviously from your own personal background, you know the Oxford High Street extremely well. How do you see this conversation going? You know, there's challenging times coming ahead for every high street, but Oxford, to a certain extent, has lost some of its momentum with a lack of visitor economy, international, Bicester Village, assuming the numbers are going to be down, and so we go on. That retail offer is really under threat. How can we re-engage that?
Yeah, so we were hit by the perfect storm, really, weren't we? A couple of years ago, we had this sort of this new thing. The Westgate landed like a spaceship, changed things overnight. So that was 2017. Then we had the consumer confidence going, and then we had the internet coming in, and we've seen retail rents change dramatically over the last few years. Some areas have been supported by the increase in tourism, and we were doing well, as we know from all the buses parked in St Giles, that there were a lot of people coming for day trips here. But I think we will see a significant amount of vacancy coming forward. I think we're at about 9% vacancy in our retail space in the city at the moment. I think my prediction is that probably within 6 to 9 months, we could see that going up to 20%, maybe a bit more, so doubling. And I think landlords have to be flexible. They're going to have to be flexible with their existing tenants. They're going to have to be flexible with new tenants. They're going to have to maybe give very soft deals or very temporary deals, pop-up shops. But I think the planning system also needs to flex to allow different uses in there. I think that market forces will determine, and if we have planning regimes that are restrictive, it'll further exacerbate the problem. So I think we've almost got to unlock the boundaries on the city and make the market find its place. You're on mute.
Julian mentions that introduction of business centres on the high street. Would you agree with that? And I guess what we're really talking about is a change of use, and there's huge pressure for that.
Yeah.
Ironically, the high street is, by definition, the best position within the town. But we must need to look at alternative uses. Do you think Oxford's going to need to embrace that?
Yeah, traditionally, I think the trouble is retail has always been quite an expensive rent, or it's yielded the best result for landlords. An office tenant doesn't want to pay the same amount as a retailer, but that will balance as there are fewer retailers around, and landlords have to flex towards whatever they can get towards an income source. Not all units will be equally relevant. So it's difficult. You've got to look at the physical side of it as well, and the adaptability of it. But there are some big properties out there still. Boswell's went on the market just before Christmas. I doubt whether that exchanged before COVID. It'll be interesting to see where that goes now. There's Debenhams on the horizon. How long that can survive for? Those are great opportunities. And then there are smaller units where possibly other uses could have potential there, but it needs landlords to flex.
A lot, and it'd be interesting to hear from Laura about your view on that, because obviously, Laura, partnerships, and this is where the council comes in, or the county council. How do you view that, Laura?
In terms, it depends what type of partnerships. So I think one of the best things to do is to partner with organizations to benefit from the different skills, the skill sets that each organization have. And that's what the Innovation Hub do a lot. We are at the Innovation Hub really challenging the county council to invest in different business models. So an example that I can give is a mobility model, something that local authorities spend a lot of money on. And in the past, it's something that the county council has bought from a consultant and then relied heavily on that consultant for expertise. What we've done with the mobility model is partnered with 4 or 5, some local, some regional organisations, and invested in it. So we're seeing this as an investment for the citizens of Oxfordshire, and something that we potentially could then go and sell outside Oxfordshire as well. So I think challenging business models is really important. I think we will all property owners will relook at the land they have, and whether or not we can downsize with different working practices. And that's something the county council has got experience with the new chief exec, because Chairwell partnered and did some collaborations in that area. So I think it's something that people will be definitely open to, and the Innovation Hub has got a lot of business case and business model experience, and we'll be supporting that.
And understanding that connection is there, because having the county council involved in these areas, it seems to me, is really important going forward. One thing we've perhaps learned is the need for collaboration and to have this partnership approach. And I'd be interested to see how we can do that. Just talking about stakeholders and partners, Harriet, perhaps we could bring you in there and to give us your views about how the university is engaged with this debate from a sustainability point of view, and whether you see, looking ahead, and let's now start to bring the conversation to that. And there's a couple of questions about this, about what's the kind of ambition for the county, and I guess what's the ambition for the university. And I assume you'll be looking at some of these things in your report. How ambitious should we be in this sustainability and discussion which you're following?
Well, that's a massive question, really. And the level of ambition needs to match with the place that you're at, doesn't it? So it would be really odd for Oxford University not to have a high level of ambition, but we haven't really managed to articulate that really when it comes to sustainability so far. That's the point of us writing this strategy. We have articulated it, well, I mean, clearly in our research work and our teaching, and in different bits of sustainability. So we've done some really good stuff on transport. The fact that we charge our staff to park at the university, that's not by no means a standard approach, and we've been doing that since 2000, and we charge them a considerable amount, and it's in relation to their salary. So you know, we have made some kind of quite specific big moves, but we haven't really ever done anything that's a whole overriding look at sustainability and trying to work out exactly where our ambitions are going to be. And if, for me, the university is a bit like a city in itself, and trying to get a consensus on anything that you do, especially something like sustainability, where we have experts, we have technical experts, but then everyone has an opinion as well. So it's a bit like any difficult issue that you try to progress, and trying to get build a consensus is a full-time job. And I think the consultation that we did earlier in the year about what we should be doing on sustainability really gave us the evidence that we needed, that the university community wants us to be very ambitious. And I think that's a reflection of Oxford itself and Oxfordshire. We've got very ambitious people around us, and we've got a wealth of opportunity. So this, this brave word is a very useful word to be using. And yeah, I think that's the best way of framing the pandemic. What kinds of opportunities does it bring us, and what can we do that's more ambitious?
Large question, but I think you cope with it admirably. So thank you for that. It's the nature of where we are, I guess, and also with the university. To some extent, you have the scale and the size and the depth of resource to be ambitious and to be market leading. So I think that's quite important to hear that. So that's very good. If I could just go back to Rachel now. Rachel, with your other hat on, I know we've spoken in the past about the high street, and also you were involved with the lexicon at Bracknell. What's your view on this high street discussion? Obviously, bear in mind we're in Oxford, but where do you fit within that discussion and some of the things that Richard's talked about?
Yeah, as others have said, I mean, this really accelerates a problem that we all knew we had to deal with, and there will be a lot more casualties on the high street as a result of this. Just keeping an eye on the chat function, and I completely agree with others in terms of repurposing the high street for what the need is, and that could be more business, incubator, startup space, and the opportunity to introduce residential. Now, that is in places where it's potentially a little bit easier to do that, and again, trying to get the balance of the heritage environment with what can be done, the challenge always comes about of who is going to pay for it. And these things are expensive, especially when it comes to the high street. A lot of the shops are in individual ownerships. So how can you try to get people to work together? And I know, like, one of the things in Oxford actually is that for its size, it is quite surprising that there aren't more city or county-wide co-working spaces, for want of a better expression. And there's money obviously that comes in through OSI, which is specifically targeted to university businesses. But you know, how do we kind of break that down a little bit and make it a bit more inclusive? So I think there's definitely something we can do. The challenge always comes in who's going to pay for it, how long the payback period is. The fact that valuations will decline massively will force landlords to completely rethink their strategy, and that is an opportunity. We've seen it before, and it will happen again. And actually the best ideas, you know, no one ever thought about like food courts and pop-ups and curating space before. Well, they probably did in like medieval times, but then it went away again, and it came back in as a result of the financial crisis. And similar things will come out of it this time, when you can't rely on the market to increase the value of your asset. So asset managers have to work a lot harder, and that's when some really good ideas start to appear.
That's fascinating, and I think ultimately you can only control what's in front of you, Rachel. And I guess within the projects you're doing, how will you, where it's relevant, get involved, collaborate with people? What sort of mechanisms can you introduce to allow people to get involved in their views within a project? So we're actually about to launch our first public consultation, and it will be interesting to see how that goes. But we're looking at engaging people earlier on more conceptual topics to understand like what really matters. So rather than commenting on a scheme, trying to understand what matters to the people who live there, who use the area, who might move there, whatever it may be. And using a lot more social media, using, you know, tools such as this to really get a good data source, because it's so difficult in our roles. I think so often we sit down at a table and we stop being people, and we make decisions as developers or planners or whatever it may be. But actually, there is no reason now why we can't engage, get better data, find out what people want, and really prioritize to meet the requirements of people locally. And hopefully through doing that and showing that it works, others will follow and want to be part of it. Helpful, thank you. Richard, can you help on some of the questions here as we get to the end of our session? There's a couple here. I'm not sure about Major Matt or Mayor Matt, but I'll ignore those ones. But there's a number of questions about the high street. How do you reconcile some of that about more flexible approach? And again, given I know you've got various hats like Mr. Ben, which is a reference to a 1970s program, but if is the high street able to be flexible enough in your view?
Yeah, I'm sort of involved in the sharp end of retail as well, with a different hat on, with a family business, and the cold hard truth is that the income tap's been turned off. So what do you do if you don't have any income coming in? You've got to speak to your landlord. We're not a singular a business in this scenario. Every business is pretty much impacted the same, certainly in non-essential retail. And it requires those landlords to be flexible, because if you disappear, there's not going to be anyone else to replace you for some period of time. I was just reflecting on one of the other questions from which was really about the balance of Oxford. And I think we've got three component parts. We've got domestic, we've got student, and we've got tourism as our three customer component parts. And two of those aren't around, and the third one's not particularly confident about coming in at the moment. So I think it's going to take a long time to get that confidence back, and it's going to be a hard slog to change. And the internet is here good and proper now, so businesses have to flex, have to be multi-channel. But it's opportunity for a town centre that doesn't just depend upon retail, that has a burgeoning science and tech sector that wants to stay in the city as much as it can. So there will be opportunities for those. And it's got a resilient academic network with two great universities. And I think we should still remember again that, you know, this crisis isn't just about retail impacting the high street. It's about the whole of our commercial property sector as well, which is the focus point of our network here, really. And I find that we're all pretty busy at the moment. There's lots of discussions going on, and this is why it gives me a little bit of positivity, optimism. You've got to be optimistic as a commercial agent, otherwise you just go home and cry, and that's not allowed in this market. Although I do have I got my tissues with me here just in case. But you know, I think science and technology will see us through, and from that, we will see a stronger but more diverse town centre.
Okay.
And flexing to that customer base, that driver, that income flow.
Okay, that's an interesting thought of an agent crying on a video link, but that's okay. Can we just take you for that, Richard? And you've given a bit of a summary there. Harriet, perhaps you could give us a bit of a summary as we're coming to the end, the final 3 minutes here. If you could sum up, really, just looking ahead, Harriet, and I know you've touched on some of the ambition for the university, but what's your view, having listened and with your remits, just to give some summary comment?
Just that it's a brave new world, really, and we need to work in partnership with people more than we ever have done before, and look for the opportunities that having a pandemic has taught us about. Don't think I've got more to say than that.
Okay, no, that's fine. That's very helpful. Thank you for that. And we'll just go on to Laura now. Laura, could you give us a summary of what you see from the Oxfordshire County Council, and having listened to some of this, what's your view on this?
Yeah, I think a lot of it comes back to how we create spaces for individuals and for future generations. And I think what's important about future generations is we don't necessarily know what they will want and how they will want spaces to be. So my background is strategic planning, so I always seem to come back to planning. So this is about building flexibility into the planning system, and the planning system is historically very rigid, and that's where I really want to start to get some wriggle room from central government to say, actually, how do we build flexibility to allow developments that are being given planning permission now but won't be built out for 20 years? How do we make sure those developments have got an opportunity to change and to flex in response to users' aspirations and needs? The County Council and our team and our service is producing something called an innovation framework, and that framework is looking to produce something to help developers and planning officers build that flexibility, and also to evidence what's changing now and what's happening across the world. So to de-risk it for them at a public examination, to say we can be flexible now. That doesn't mean you're not going to have the best type of development. So for me, it's about building in all the learning that we've got, and we have to date, but building flexibility for those future generations.
Okay, that's very helpful. Thank you for that. Right, as the last 30 seconds, just to really summarise where we are with that, and some housekeeping. Maybe the speakers could just, if there's any answers they want to give on the right-hand side to some of the questions posed. I know, Richard, you've been answering. That's very helpful. That would be really good. I know there's a few questions here. People like Victor have been, and Hannah have been very busy. Thank you for that. And try and we can make the most of this session. So just some house notes really just to finish. Many thanks to my production team here. Alan Bunce will be writing in Thames Tap on Monday, so please look at that for notes. Also, very many thanks to Hugh Blaser, who is the X in Oxford. The O is Richard, and thank you to him for helping with this. Our next event is on the 6th of June, and that's looking more of a Reading and Berkshire, and hopefully we can get more involved there. And finally, thank you for me. It's the first time I've done this, but it seemed to go okay. No doubt I'll get some feedback, and we'll get it a bit slicker as we go on. But there's lots to talk about, and Oxford is really good to do this event with all the speakers. And finally, thank you to the speakers. It's been very, very good to have you involved and to have your time. Hopefully see you at the next session. Bye-bye.